Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome, and thank you so much for being with us. My name is Julie Gaffney. I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of Fordham Center for Community Engaged Learning. And the center's mission is to build bridges between Fordham University and our neighboring communities through experiential learning opportunities for our students, research opportunities for our faculty members, placements for our graduate students, and also through a consortium and really coalition model of partners who are working toward community development and community solutions. And so we're really delighted to welcome our distinguished panelists, who I know one of our student moderators is going to introduce in more detail, but Vincent Stevenson, Felix Gonzalez, Debra Mack-Glasgow, and Jacobs, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening and to share your expertise and your vision for community development in the field of reentry. We're really looking forward to the conversation. I also want to acknowledge and honor my team members who are with us this evening and who are really the architects of this event, Sure Miranda Alarcon and Kujaji Kamara, Maria Rodriguez, who is really the glue that keeps us all together, and our fantastic students who are really going to be moderating this conversation. They are honor students in the senior seminar on incarceration taught by Professor Ann Hoffman, and we have with us Gabrielle Yancey, Grace Getman, Kayla Champion, and Francis Murray. So really excited to turn things over to you all right now, and to really just to say that we see this conversation as a crucial and a very important one, and a place to begin further collaborations between the Fordham community and the work of our panelists, the work of community organizations, policymakers in the area of reentry and working with formerly incarcerated individuals. So welcome, everyone. I know this is going to be a really inspiring and important conversation, and thank you again.
Thank you, Julie, for starting us off. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. After Incarceration, Exploring the Community Response. Today, we have brought together several experts who deal with the reentry process directly and indirectly. Through academic analysis, policy work, and nonprofit organizing, our panelists are strongly situated to help us understand the way our institutions can aid formerly incarcerated individuals following their reentry into broader community. With us today is Ann Jacobs, Executive Director of John Jay College's Institute for Justice and Opportunity. The Institute creates opportunities for incarcerated individuals by providing them access to education and services to aid them, helping individuals find gainful employment in the reentry process. We are happy to welcome Ann Jacobs, who has decades of experience of advocacy and work in criminal justice, to our panel today. Also with us is Vincent J. Stevenson II, the Reentry Program Supervisor of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We are very glad to welcome him to our panel today. Felix Gonzalez is the coordinator of the Bronx County Reentry Task Force at the Fortune Society. The Fortune Society aims to target a wide array of challenges faced by those who came into contact with the criminal justice system, addressing concerns with employment, harmed bonds between families, and housing insecurity. Thank you, Felix Gonzalez, for coming here today to discuss your experiences with the Fortune Society. Lastly, we are joined by Debra Mack-Glasgow, Director of the Workforce Development and Reentry at Bronx Connect. In her position at Bronx Connect, she has worked to assist in the employment aims of returning citizens. Bronx Connect, through the Workforce and Reentry Program, provides over 200 formerly incarcerated individuals with direct case management services every year. We are very excited to have the opportunity to hear from all of our panelists, and thank you all for your time and coming to speak with us today. This panel will be moderated by Gabrielle Yancey, Grace Getman, and Kayla Champion. Over the past semester, our honors seminar class has been focused exclusively on incarceration and the reentry experience. We produce reports on the complex factors at play in the lives of formerly incarcerated individuals. Our group analyzed health outcomes, employment, education, and housing insecurity. Our professor, Dr. Hoffman, led our class to create long-form research narratives on these topics and led our class in the formation of this panel today. As a class, we have seen the incredible intersection and complexities at play in the lives of reentering citizens. It is our hope that this panel will be illuminating not just the resources needed by formerly incarcerated people, but how our institutions, including Fordham University, can aid in bettering the outcomes of those going through reentry. There will be an opportunity for audience Q&A after this discussion. So if you could please write your questions into the Zoom chat, or I think there's also a Q&A section to have your question read out after our initial panel discussion portion. In the interest of time, I ask that panelists keep their responses to a maximum of 5 minutes each. With that, I will pass it off to Gabriel Yancey, who will start off our panel discussion.
Yes, thank you, and thank you all for coming again. So after we've given some brief introductions of all of our panelists here, we wanted to ask that each of you start off by explaining your current role at your institution and how you have attempted to address the needs of formerly incarcerated individuals in your work. So we can start with Ann Jacobs, and then we can just go through everyone, but just describe in your own words what your relationship with that is.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me tonight. I would have preferred to go last. I'm a great respecter of my colleagues' efforts. And since I've joined CUNY, the City University of New York, 10 years ago, I've been looking for ways that the university can support the reentry community that I actually was part of when I was at the Women's Prison Association and the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. We have a very rich community of both not-for-profit and governmental partners in New York who care about criminal justice reform and who care about alternatives to incarceration, which are in some ways more important than reentry. I had a center that used to be known as the Prisoner Reentry Institute. And for lots of reasons that are probably obvious to you, the name was just inappropriate and old-timey. And we preferred to focus on what we're there to do, which is to create pathways to opportunity in higher ed and employment for people who've got lived experience in the justice system. And it doesn't matter to us, you know, what that experience was, although in the continuum of direct services that we've created, we do have a college and prison program at Otisville Correctional Facility. We have taught both for-credit and college prep classes at Rikers. But the majority of our work is in the community, working with you, my colleagues on the panel, and others to provide support getting into and succeeding at CUNY. Primarily, it's been the academic programs offered by the City University of New York, not just at John Jay, but across CUNY. We are very interested and are still on a learning curve of how we can do a better job of also being a pathway to the workforce development programs and certificate programs of CUNY, not just the academic programs. So we see about 1,000 students a year. We have about 300 at any one time that we're assisting in enrolling in CUNY or who are there. Our services include access to a lawyer to clean up their rap sheet, working on digital literacy, peer mentoring, as well as the kind of concrete services of assisting somebody in enrolling and getting financial aid. Just as we have partnered with the community, we believe in centering the voices of people who are directly affected and listening to them and the people who work with them about what's needed and wanted. So we always start projects by surveying the landscape and figuring out what's the unique thing we can do to fill a gap or elevate everybody's work in this area. So by definition, a lot of the work that we do is in coalitions. And a lot of the housing advocacy we've done has been in partnership with Fortune and other organizations. But we have particularly stepped into the role of trying to support the development of people who've been involved in the criminal legal system who want to have careers in human services and community justice. So besides helping those people who want to enroll in college do that, we also designed and deliver the Navigator Certificate Program in human services and community justice, and have had the privilege of serving many of your staff and many staff and clients in the other reentry agencies. So I'm gonna stop there. I could go on for forever, but I hope I've given you a flavor that we're trying to like leverage being in this rich system called CUNY, which is the engine of social mobility for so many New Yorkers, but eliminate the barriers that keep someone that has a conviction history from thinking that they are college material, or that they can access it, or that they can reconcile it with, you know, the other very complicated demands on them as they're constructing a whole life for themselves. Thanks for the opportunity to cover that.
Yes, thank you, Ann Jacobs, for sharing all of the ways you've been able to work with CUNY and coalition building. So if we can go on now to Vincent Stevenson, can you give a brief overview of your involvement?
Yes, thank you for having me. So yes, my name is Vincent Stevenson. I'm the ReEntry Program Supervisor at DA's office. Our role in reentry is very different, given that we are a law enforcement agency, in particular, but the prosecutor's office. So what we try to do is start the reentry process from the moment of arrest. Keep in mind that this is a new administration, and so there's a huge transition going on when it comes to reentry, as well as everything else. When it comes to starting reentry from the moment of arrest, we try to think about what type of needs the individual will have prior to actually even being convicted. So there's a huge issue when it comes to, okay, what about family? Maybe child support, might be a PSR report. We think about parole letters, everything that will affect them during their incarceration upon their return home. We're trying to build into our reentry programming. When it comes to the reentry process of an individual about to go before a parole board, we work on that. We actually have a good relationship in Greenhaven with Exodus, where there's a program that helps individuals who are about to go before the parole board. We do seminars with those individuals. We do, just all around preparation, psychological, emotional preparation, even when it comes to going before the parole board. Once they come out, we have a range of services. So our biggest project is called the task force, the reentry task force. This was an initiative started by DCJS, and basically they awarded seed funding throughout New York State in various counties to start a reentry model. And we had, along with docs, we're both co-chairs. And when I say docs, I mean community supervision, parole. We had it with docs as co-chairs. We use Exodus actually as our vendor to carry out our services. And so our reentry model in the task force is to look at the highest level individuals, the most high risk individuals who are coming out of prison. We try to offer them wraparound services, as much support as possible to keep them from getting back into the life. We also have what's called forums. We have parole forums and probation forums. The parole forum more geared towards VFOs, violent felony offenders, individuals who usually had a gun crime and they've gotten out within the last month or so. We bring them before a panel. Along that panel would be myself, ADA, a U.S. attorney, ATF, NYPD white shirt, and about 3 or 4 CBOs on the panel. The CBOs, community-based organizations, have credible messengers who speak. And the idea is, as they sit before the panel, we welcome them back, and we basically try to encourage and motivate them to look at this as a new start and to take advantage of all the resources that's in the room that they can sign up for right on the spot. We have a similar model to probation. Probation is a little bit more laxed, but it's the same idea. We have a theme of choices in which we try to encourage the youth who are on probation to, turn their life around, to really think about tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and to really take advantage of the support that they have in the room, whether it's through their probation officer or the various community-based organizations that's willing to step in and help them out. ReEntry for our office, as some may know, we actually was able to fund a few programs through our asset forfeiture funds. This is money we seize in various cases. So for instance, we have a DMV project where anybody in New York City who's coming out on parole can get a driver's ID or license up to $17.50 for absolutely free. We also have a project that we did in West Harlem in response to a big takedown that we did of over 100 people. As those individuals are coming back out, we thought to sort of flood the community with resources and support to welcome these individuals back and to sort of heal the community as much as possible.
Thank you, Vincent. I think we're going to move on to next.
Yeah, so if now we can have Felix Gonzalez share a bit about what your relationship with ReEntry is. And again, thank you, Vincent, and thank you for coming with us and sharing this law enforcement side of things, or this different perspective on the ReEntry process.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for having me here today. Before I start, I just want to just say that it's really a great pleasure to be in the same Zoom with Ann Jacobs. I've heard Ann Jacobs' name for so long, and I know the work that she's done, and it's just really nice to be here with you, Mr. Jacobs. My name is Felix Gonzalez. I am currently I work with Fortune Society. I am the Bronx County Reentry Task Force Coordinator. So just like Mr. Stevenson was saying, I am a coordinator of the County Reentry Task Force. As a matter of fact, today I was on Gary Brown's bi-monthly meeting that he had with, he partners with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and parole. So basically, I'll tell you briefly about Fortune, and then I'll go into my role. So of course, Fortune's been around for a very long time, since 1967. There's a very rich history of helping folks that are returning citizens that are coming home. Currently, we have wraparound services to meet all the different needs that returning citizens may have. And some of those you spoke about earlier when you spoke about housing, education, employment, healthcare, mental health services, and the list goes on. In my particular role as the County Reentry Task Force, I partner with 2 state agencies. One is the New York State Department of Corrections and Community Services, which we all know as parole, specifically Bronx Parole, and also the Bronx District Attorney's Office. So we work together with other service providers in the Bronx to work closely with folks that are returning specifically to the Bronx, right? So like Mr. Stevenson said, moderate to high risk individuals that are returning to the Bronx community. One of the things that we work hard to do is to identify those folks and then come up with a come up with a reentry plan, something that could really work to benefit their transition. And it's done in a way that is, we identify the needs. There's a cognitive behavioral intervention piece that's really important that's put into that packet. And then my job and my team's job is that we basically want the person to win, right? We want to make sure that they're meeting all their needs, they're getting connected to the resources that they need, they're addressing their mandated services, their parole mandates, because you know when they go to the parole board and they're granted release, there's also mandates that go along with it. So one of the things that we work to do is to give them the support that they need, connect them to the services that they need, and always be a point of contact for them. The case manager, myself, and the rest of my team, we work hard to try to create a relationship, a working relationship with the returning citizen to show that there is somebody there that supports them. One of the big concerns is that many folks come home and a lot of folks there's nothing to come home to. So that's a big concern. But I've been with the County Reentry Task Force now for close to 2 years. However, I've been in the social services realm for about 10 years now. And I'm really happy to be on this panel today. And I hope that, you know, my input can be super helpful.
Thank you. Like, we're thankful to have you here with us as well. And then last, can we have Debra Mack-Glasgow please explain a little bit of what you do?
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this incredible team of amazing people in this business. I'm very familiar with Anne. I worked with her when she started the Women's Prison Association's program, the housing piece. She had a Steps to Independence. Incredible work. I've learned a lot from her. So I'm glad to see we're on the same page still for all these years. Bronx Connect, what we do, we're the babies of the reentry program, so to speak. We recently got a full contract to do reentry. How we're targeting our workforce initiative is that we've looked at it from the employment piece, from training to internships to education. So my workforce initiative is geared around a team of people to help them individually track the direction of their career paths. So when someone comes out or someone's been out, we start to identify with them with some of their barriers, of course, but more importantly, where they see themselves, and then begin to teach them how to take their passion and prepare them to get into those fields that they're looking for. So right now we have like 52 people who are right now preparing for CDLs. CDL, we didn't know what we were getting into, but we wanted to do things that were very different and non-traditional that really would be able to allow this population to work and enter the industry. So we hired our own person to help them prepare for that permit test, because what we were finding when we got into this is that the permits were very difficult. The whole process for getting a CDL is an extreme challenge. So we hired our own person on site so that we can now help people pass that permit piece and really understand what they would need to do. So that's how we're targeting our reentry program, individually and specifically around the trainings that they need that are relevant to the job market as to it is in New York City. So we look at New York City, where all of the jobs that make sense, that are relevant, that people need training for. We don't want to just do jobs in construction, but we want to really have them access those things. We pay for licensing, we help them with their driver's license, we identify home health aid, and then help them recognize how they can take those areas that they've targeted and make a career path and set up their career path in that way. So I've been very, very specific about how we set that up. We've partnered with everyone from probation to NYCHA, We also have our own real estate person on site. We have specialized people in employment. So I have a whole team that I've been specifically and very, very systematic about preparing to help this population. Currently, we have over 1,100 people that we've already enrolled in our program, and we automatically put them in an paid internship. While they're in a paid internship, we're working with them specifically towards permanent employment and training. So you might be in an internship, but then you have to also go into a training initiative. Then you might also be working with the employment specialist towards the other piece of bucketing out where your career path is heading and in what direction. So we've been very, very specific about how we're moving with them. But the goal is training and housing initially, and also we're just trying to identify all the barriers that get in that way. And right now, what we're seeing is that helping people tease out where they see themselves in their career path. Because a lot of times they really don't understand where they see them. They say, I want a job. Okay, you want a job? Let's talk about what that job looks like. So if you want to be a home health aide, do you know you can be a medical assistant? You can be an RN, you can lead to that. You can be an ultrasound technician. So, but we have to teach them how to understand how the market can take them into different directions and in what areas. And we might suggest, you might not want to go into a certain area because in New York City, they're not hiring. So we help them recognize where the jobs are, and then we prepare them for those jobs in that aspect. One of the things that makes Bronx Connect unique is that we also have alternatives to incarceration programs. We have my other Mock J fundings to deal with people on the streets that are getting into trouble. We have high school dropout prevention programs, and they're all funneled towards us if they have a background. So we're working with the young people in school, we're working with young who are older, we're working with those individuals coming out of jail. We're working with them in custody as well as they begin to get released, how we help them prepare for that as well.
Thank you, and thank you again to all of the panelists for giving this little bit of insight into the kinds of things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to the next question. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I have a follow-up question for that. Based on these answers and your lived experiences, what would you say are the most primary or the most salient barriers to reentry that you face in your daily work with returning citizens? And since Ann Jacobs, you didn't like going first, we can start with Vincent Stevenson first this time.
If I understood your question correctly, I don't think there's enough focus on the mental health and development of individuals who are coming back out of prison. We tend to focus on, various resources in terms of housing, jobs, training. But I used to work at Rikers, and working at Rikers was a lot, but I got to come home. And so Rikers is one thing, prison is a whole nother ball game. What it takes for an individual to survive there, when they come out, something has to happen. I don't know the right answer. I don't know the right program. I don't know the right modality, but there needs to be some sort of real focus on clinical assessments and taking sort of the mental health status and the development, psychological, emotional development of individuals we're trying to help. I'm not going to necessarily say seriously, but just more attention to it.
Thank you. And thank you so much. And Felix Gonzalez, would you like to speak next?
Sure. Absolutely. I would have to echo exactly what Mr. Stevenson said, specifically with individuals that went in when they were very young, juveniles, and spent a great deal of time in prison and came home when they were in their late 20s, early 30s, or even 40s. When you speak about the development, the development, and there, obviously, there's a clinical piece that's kind of missing. I mean, we could set folks up for reentry and give them all the services that they need, but that mental wellness, that therapeutic environment, that's definitely a challenge, amongst other things. One of the challenges that I see working with folks that come home when they're specific crimes, like someone who comes home with a sex offense, and there's a lot of barriers where they can stay, where they can reside. I've got folks that are coming home, they're scheduled to come home, and their date just keeps getting pushed back and back further away, only because they can't get appropriate housing based on their conviction. So that's a barrier.
Thank you very much. And then if either Anne or Deborah has anything to add, if you would love to speak up, we would love it.
Well, for me, it's always wraparound services, especially depending on where people are individually. So if mental health is a huge issue, of course, that's a major challenge for us. But also the wraparound services really have to address the mental health. I think we all are finding that's a huge barrier for all of us, because we have resources in the city, but can they take advantage of them because of their mental health issues? And how can they take advantage of them? So I think for me, that's the real issue.
Thank you. And Jacobs, if you'd like to add.
Yeah, the challenge for me is going to be being succinct. I agree with everything my colleagues have said. And, you know, I have to also give a shout out to housing, which is a pervasive problem for every New Yorker. It is, you know, really foundational or pivotal for people who are trying to rebuild a whole life after the interruption of incarceration. And, you know, I've participated in these discussions about what's the most important for now decades. And it really varies based on the person. All of us as human beings need a place to live. We need money in our pocket so we can get across town and buy clothes and feed ourselves. We have our own personal health, mental health, substance abuse, you know, chronic illness, you know, kinds of issues that we have to deal with. We have our aspirations as it relates to our children. Reunification is a big one for many people. And we've got, you know, the criminal justice system wants a piece of you. You have to report to parole. You have to pay your fines and fees and whatever else. And I could go on. So there are these different domains, and where people stand in this has a lot to do with what their lives were like before. For people who never had a lease in their own name, that's a very high hurdle. For people who are coming out to families who stood by them and have an extra bedroom, it's a totally different, you know, kind of set of challenges. So when I was thinking about this at the Women's Prison Association, I distinguished what are the survival needs, like what do they need today to get through the day? And then our goal is to stabilize them. And that's sometimes short-term transitional housing or short-term kinds of resources that are available in the community. But the goal is self-sufficiency and increasing levels of self-sufficiency. People come out and they'll take any job they can get because they need money in their pocket. But the goal for them, as for you and I, is to have a job that pays a living wage and has benefits. So in that way, it's a lifelong process. You know, the people talk about the first 24 hours, the first week, the first 3 months, all of which are critical and crucial. But coming out with the additional burden of a conviction history and having lost that much time to the street, I mean, digital literacy familiarity, all of that can be a lifelong, reentry can be a lifelong process. And the focus will just shift as people get their feet more underneath them here, they'll have the opportunity to do more there. Not concise, but I felt compelled to like get it all out there.
We appreciate it. All right, Grace.
So this is more of a question. Also, I'm a bit away from the mic, so if there's any issues with hearing, please let me know. But this is more of a question for our panelists who are on the kind of community support side. So based on everything we've heard tonight, how do we change people's hearts regarding the issue of mass incarceration and reentry issues in New York City and in our country? So if you would like to speak, please speak up. There's no order here.
Yeah, I'll try to jump in and answer that somewhat. So, in order for us to get people to change how they feel about things, oftentimes change comes when someone experiences the criminal justice system, either personally or through a loved one. Sometimes that is an agent of change for someone. I know folks who, lock them up, throw away the key, and then when that experience is at their doorstep, they have a different view of it. It's a conversation. It's communication. It's like any other divide, any other divide that we find in our society. People have to learn how to communicate, and it starts with our leaders, the people that lead the city, that lead our country. It starts with the folks, the community stakeholders, the families. It's so many people involved, but I think, and I always echo this, that our CEO, Joanne Page, says. She said, where would the world be without a second chance, right? Not just a person that's returning from prison, a person who spent some time behind bars, but anyone. Where would we be without second chances? So I think, it would have to be communication.
Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate hearing that. Is there anyone else who wants to jump in?
May I? I know a little bit different, but I believe in the power of storytelling. I believe that it's not, the sole answer, but helping people really understand, whether it's through documentaries, podcasts, interviews, having people who've gone through the process, involved the criminal justice system in various facets, whether it's just community supervision, whether there's individuals who got life, individuals who serve a long prison sentence, or individual who's involved with ATI, and also the impact of the families of individuals who go through the system. There needs to be more storytelling. I think that will definitely impact how people understand what they don't understand, what they know nothing about. A lot of people have opinions who are far removed from it. So like bringing it to the person's living room, I think would definitely help out big time.
Thank you. And with that,
For me, I just want to add something. For me, it's addressing the trauma, because we know these people. We've worked with them our whole lives. We met them when they dropped out of school. We met them when they were institutionalized. We met them when they got in trouble and wound up getting arrested for petty crimes or having trauma at home. So addressing the trauma at hand and acknowledging it has helped us tremendously when we have to address the issue of barriers with our individual participants. So for me, we know who they are. They're folks we see every single day. So how we address it is key. And that helps us figure out what led them to the crime so that we can begin to help reduce recidivism among the people in our communities. Because these are folks from our communities. These are not strangers. And I think if we look at it from that aspect, it's easier to work with it because we understand these are people from our communities. These aren't strangers.
thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
Can I add? Can I
Yeah.
just add? I mean, I think that what everybody has said is it's putting a face on what we're talking about. People who get involved in the criminal legal system aren't generally who the public thinks they are. What happens on Law and Order, and I'm ashamed of watching it, is not like my experience of the reality of the criminal legal system. And I found when I took people, I had a goal when I was at the Women's Prison Association of taking 2,000 people to prison by the year 2000. And to a person, they walked in and then they walked out and went, prison isn't what I thought it was. And those people aren't who I thought they were either. I mean, it's to Debra's point about the trauma. It's like being aware of the shift from asking people, you know, what they did and why, you know, to like, what happened to you? Once you begin to understand people's stories, as Vincent's talking about, you know, they're like you and me. We, you know, and to Felix's point, we all need fresh starts all the time. So it's getting up close and not, you know, seeing the connection more than the perceived differences, I'd say.
All right, well, thank you. And with that, I think we'll go on to our next question.
Yeah, so just I guess bringing the conversation a bit more around to Fordham. So you all have different relationships with this a bit, and Dr. Ann Jacobs, you've already talked a bit, like since you are in a university type setting, you have a different relationship with this question. But it was, in which ways have organizations that you've either been a part of or heard of worked with universities or other educational institutions in order to combat reentry? And connected to that, are there models that you would recommend or advice you have for Fordham getting into that space?
With our office, we actually work closely with Cornell University. I'm going to badger the school's name, but it's like their industrial school. Basically, when it comes to all of our job fairs, we partner with them, in which they teach soft skills, hard skills to the individuals on parole. And we actually did the first ever job fair inside prison at Queensboro Correctional Facility, of which they went inside and actually did workshops for everyone who's going for a job interview, doing mock interviews, the whole nine. So Fordham could definitely model that in partnership with you know, any other organization that does at least job fairs. One more thing, I'm a licensed social worker. I really believe in the social work field. We need more social workers, and we need more social workers who are involved with this particular field. As I said earlier, in regards to the mental health, being able to do clinical assessments, and being able to really help an individual out in their plan. Their mental health plan will help in relation to their reentry plan as well.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question again?
It was if there's any models or advice you would have based on other structures that you know of for how Fordham as an educational institution could get involved in the reentry process or in helping returning citizens.
I remember a few months ago in the fall when I had a chance to meet Sure Miranda, and we spoke, and she mentioned that, you know, how can Fordham play a role in reentry? And of course, you know, my first reaction was educational opportunity, employment opportunity. I started thinking about it, mentorship, volunteers. We have Fortune Society has some new initiatives. We have some new senior housing living that are underway right now. We have a building. We have folks that are 62 years and over that are returning citizens, and they didn't have anyone to come home to, and now they have apartments. You know, Fordham could play a role in meeting with them, you know, playing chess with them, interacting with them. I mean, there's so many ideas of how Fordham can help, but I do want to go back to a time and when it was PRI, John Jay, and College Initiative, And I remember at Fortune back in 2010, there was a college initiative program, and I know it's connected through John Jay. Is that correct, Ms. Jacobs? And that was, I thought that was a great relationship. I saw so many returning citizens getting that first taste of academia, of college connection. And you know, there was a time, and I'm really happy now that the restoration of TAP in the New York State prison system is back. But there was a long time, 26 years, where college programs were very scarce in the prison systems. I mean, thankful for the program at Otisville right now. But there was a time where there was no college. And now with TAP being reintroduced, I'm hopeful that there will be that collegiate presence in the schools to help better prepare folks for reentry. But I think like relationships like the one the college initiative had with places like Fortune, I don't think that relationship still exists, but I think college initiative still exists.
Well, you'll be happy to know that we're trying to recruit for a director of outreach and intake so that we can reset our relationships with Fortune and the rest of the community, because we very much want referrals from you to college initiative. And as I said, you know, we can help enroll people, not just in the colleges of CUNY, but those are the ones that are more affordable. Some of our students do get scholarships or have the opportunity to go to some private institutions or to SUNY. So if there are scholarships or other ways that Fordham becomes more affordable, students would be honored to go there. They'd be thrilled to go there. But I'm like with my colleagues, I think that you know, there is just so much that you could do if you focused on fair chance employment. You know, Fordham is an employer that, you know, you could like do some really interesting work to see how they consider somebody's conviction history and, you know, whether they want to make a commitment to affirmatively working with Debra and others, Fortune, to hire people who have conviction histories. You know, at least
match that. We can match that with a paid internship. We put people in paid internships, and it gives you an opportunity, any of the schools, anywhere, any employer, the opportunity to look at potential candidates for employment. So if you got an intern and you got 12 weeks, that is more than enough time to assess whether or not this person would be a good match for you or not. So I think that would be great if they would be willing to take some of our interns, and we pay $15 an hour. So a big chunk of our budget is to place people in paid internships and then try to match them with folks that have the potential to employ them. So I would love to see more of that.
Yeah, so I guess just to thank you for both sharing around that. And this is kind of directed again back towards Ann Jacobs, but if any of you have additional things to add around it. Given our position as students with Fordham and wanting Fordham to, or thinking about relationships that Fordham can build and different things that Fordham can look at, how would you recommend best advocating for change, like on that university level? And like, do you have any tips, like, and this is again specifically for Dr. Ann Jacobs, like, since you have done something like this, is there any advice for actually forming that kind of coalition within the university?
Well, I think you're well on the way. The fact that you've got a class that's focused on this, that you've got a center that's focused on community engagement. I mean, these are very good bones to build on, right? I'm a big believer in students having the opportunity to do service learning, to be out in the field. And we run fellowships, and I urge Fordham to have them too. Felix was inviting people to Fortune, you know, to interact with, you know, real people, real clients. There's an enormous amount of mutual benefit that can come from those kinds of linkages, and that changes everybody involved. So I recommend that. I think by you reached out to your colleagues in the Bronx. And those are also the places where there's more opportunity for more coalition kind of work. I don't know who the movers and shakers are, on your campus, some combination of board and staff and faculty. But the more you can do the kinds of things that Columbia has tried to do, for instance, of looking for the ways that these issues should be being dealt with in all of the different curricula, getting people to go to prison and visit, to have more commitment. Our colleague organization, College and Community Fellowship, does this wonderful training called Thrive with college campuses to teach them, like what are the special issues and special opportunities when you're dealing with a population that's been criminal justice involved. So, I mean, I think that there's just unlimited potential. You just have to be very strategic. And particularly with student populations turning over every 4 years or less, choose the kinds of things that will be sustainable and not just like fall off a cliff, when somebody graduates.
Thank you very much.
I would just say be very clear on your ask. And what I mean by that is like, what asks are you asking from the administration? Get 1 to 3 asks in regards to exactly, this sort of topic, whether it be a curriculum change, whether it be an actual investment. And once you are clear on those asks, 3 or 4 of you go into the administration is one thing, but if you're able to go to the administration with 2,000 signatures that you got by attending various club meetings or various classrooms by asking professors, can you stop in for 5 minutes? To me, that could really bring about serious change for Fordham University as a whole.
Thank you.
Nice. So continuing this discussion on Fordham, as much as we may seek to find one clear entry point into disrupting the system, individuals need food, housing, employment, healthcare, and more. These factors are inextricably linked. As an expansion of the previous question, Fordham University clearly acts as an educator, employer, religious authority, community member, and political actor within the Bronx and in the larger New York area. Thinking more abstractly, how does the university in New York, with significant security and policing towards students and community, along with a private elitist gated legacy, work to navigate their relationship as an institution with the carceral system? How can this be achieved creatively, such as with student education, community engagement, and so on? So if anyone wants to jump in.
I mean, what a well put question, and great language. Wow. So you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned housing, employment, education. We know those are the staples. Those are the priorities. We have, mental health and medical needs. But there are other things, right, that a person needs when they come home, like, they have their mandated services, like I mentioned before, substance abuse treatment, domestic violence, anger management. There are a lot of different mandates that they're responsible for completing. So when you take that and the responsibility to parole, the responsibility to their families, because some people do have the great opportunity of coming home to a family, but that novelty wears off too after a while, right? It's welcome home the first week, month, 2, and then after that, it's like, hey, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna work? Are you gonna do something? You can't just hang around all day. But the conversation of Fordham and their role and what they can do in the community to help in this reentry effort, I mean, it's amazing. You have to be creative. I mean, what's happening now? I'm gonna take it a little bit outside of academia. I know that there are a lot of pop-up shops. Do a pop-up shop in the community where you interact with the folks in the community, because I had a conversation once, and you know, Fordham University is like royalty in the Bronx, right? It's beautiful, it's gated, it sits right in the middle of the Bronx, and you have all these folks that walk around it that do not have access, but are somehow criminally impacted in some capacity, right? Either they know someone who's been incarcerated or they're family to someone who's been incarcerated, and then you have this great institution. And the fact that the student body, you guys are interested in finding a way to help in this effort is amazing. It's just how, right? So again, it goes back to communication. Mr. Stevenson said storytelling. It's a lot of different ways. I'll let some of the other panelists speak to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I apologize. I got a knock as soon as you was asking a question at my door. Could you just repeat the question? I know it was a long question, but just the actual question.
Yeah, so thinking more abstractly from our conversation, how does a university in New York with significant security and policing towards students and community, along with a private elitist gated legacy, work to navigate the relationship as an institution with a carceral system? How can this be achieved creatively, such as with student engagement, student education, community engagement, and so on?
I went to Our Lady of Mount Carmel from pre-K to eighth grade, and it's 2 blocks from Fordham University. And between my school, which was a Catholic school, and Fordham University, was a really, really bad school back in the day called Roosevelt High School. So much violence going on, but Fordham University was sort of in its own bubble, so to speak. And nowadays that bubble has gotten a little bit wider, but it's still a bubble. Finding ways to engage the community in general, to me, is a step in the right direction, especially given that Fordham University's population isn't reflective of the community that it actually sits in. So if you can tear out that bubble, I think a lot of things will start to sort of happen just coincidentally or just naturally, rather, from that bubble popping. And you'll find new ways. The community will even reach out to sort of partner with Fordham and what you're trying to do.
Thank you. That was really nice. Anne or Deborah, if you want to jump in.
Well, you know, I think my colleagues have couched it beautifully. I don't really know what else to add other than we probably need a dress rehearsal. What? Oh, I'm sorry, I read something. I don't know what else we need to add other than, like Vincent said, how do we pop that bubble? But it always goes back to this: how do we give the community access to this jewel in their community? And for me, the only way, again, is what are we willing to offer the community to be able to pop that bubble? Are we doing anything to offer them the opportunity to look inside this jewel and see it as opportunities for themselves? I don't know how else we could address that any other way. We've gone around and around, but the bottom line is, what are you willing to open the door to for the community? What are you willing to provide for them? Entry level, even if you started with, how do we market entry level positions in this community for people to be able to see what the opportunities are? Are we looking to see if there's a program, and it can't be the existing programs, it has to be something different. We have to meet people where they are and be willing to change our policies around education as it is. I mean, just write down, like when I went to Hostos, I went to them and said, listen, this CDL program you have is fabulous, but none of my participants can access this because that book is intimidating. So how do we prepare them? So for me, it's always, how do we meet people where they are and really give them access to the jewels in their community?
And when we say access, pipelines. And so there's a few public schools in there. I know back in the day they were really bad,
Right.
but they changed everything around. But Fordham University should have pipelines from those schools straight into Fordham University, of which they provide various resources and supports systems to those individuals who are eligible for that pipeline.
All right, thank you guys. And for right now, I just want to remind our attendees, if you'd like to write any questions in the Q&A, I think there's a Q&A section, or you can just type right in the chat so we can go ahead and get your guys' questions answered. But for now, I was actually going to ask Debra for a follow-up question on what you spoke about. Our question was, has there been any success in transitioning interns into full-time roles at companies where they intern at? What are the ranges of internships available? Is it based on individual interest or connections through your program? Are they private companies or public organizations? So I just wanted to know a little bit more about that.
One of the things that I said before, we really identify where individuals are. So we have individual plans for each of our participants, but more importantly, we do have a bucket of internships where we do partner with companies that are willing to hire them. So for instance, in our trainings for OSHA maintenance and stuff like that, we have a partner where they actually are hiring them after they finish those OSHA training initiatives. We've partnered with a HHA company where they do the training, we pay for the training, and then they do the paid internship, and then they hire them after the 12 weeks. So every partner that I develop with a company, they're either private, they're all private. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to get them to sign on to hiring a portion of those individuals that we've paid for them to have training, that we've helped them with their barriers, and they in turn have to commit to a certain number of employment opportunities. We haven't figured that out yet with the CDL, but we just figured out how we're going to get them the permits and get them to the training piece. But for each area, we're working with companies in those areas to get them to approve, to give us some slots for employment. So we'll be looking at you, Fordham, next. I'm coming for you.
As you should.
I'm coming for you. You don't need to go.
All right. So I believe we're going to begin our Q&A portion now of the evening. Again, post questions in the chat section, and we hope to get to them. And then we just ask you guys, which you've been doing actually amazingly, to limit responses to 5 minutes so we can get all the questions asked. So to start off, for Vincent, since you spoke on mental health concerns, do you feel that mental health issues faced by incarcerated people can be meaningfully addressed post-incarceration? Or should the focus be more broad, with attempts made to address mental health as a larger societal issue?
Yeah, definitely. I want to say both, because I don't think we have, I want to say, figured out exactly how we understand mental health as a society. I still think that we criminalize mental health. And this carries over into, the reentry population. But at the same time, there is more specific and direct work we could do for individuals who are coming out that is reflective of their experience being incarcerated. I'm not too sure what on a societal level we could do, because it's like a big change that needs to happen culturally. But I'm very big on the images that we see and how they influence us, and it helps us to sort of gain our knowledge of how we understand mental health in general. So yeah, so I would say both has to be addressed.
Thank you. Yeah. So our next question is broadly for all panelists, whoever wants to jump in on this one. This also ties to broader conversations on social services, addressing root issues of crime and the role of social service and justice. How much of our focus should be on reentry, which we know as an at-risk population, and how much should we be focused on broader societal shifts and addressing the root causes of crime?
So I can just jump in really quickly and add something to that. Of course, you have to look at where the problem starts, right? I mean, of course, the panel today is about reentry and resources and Fordham's role possibly, but we know that there's a larger problem, right? Somewhere something happened to that individual. That individual was impacted somewhere in their life, and if we can get to that point, if we can reach that young 13-year-old or 11-year-old early on before they get caught up into the criminal justice system, maybe it will relieve some of the latter issues, the reentry issues and the resources. Yeah, it's a great question, but you have to look at what's happening with education, what's happening in the communities, what's happening with parenting. If some of those things could get looked into, we may be able to get a jump on things early.
Thank you. Yeah, if anyone else wants to add.
I'll just add.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm pleased. I really went, please.
One of the things that I noticed that the educational system doesn't address is that, like we were talking about trauma, but parents have been traumatized a lot too about their kids around their learning disabilities. And one of the things I noticed that we have a huge issue around learning disabilities in our communities. That might be something that Fordham can help parents understand a little differently, because a lot of times kids get in trouble because parents don't know where to go or how to navigate the systems around their children's educational issues. So if that is an issue, then it becomes a problem down the road, and that leads to trauma. And for me, sometimes helping parents understand how to advocate for their children before they wind up in a place where they give up. It's when I was running an after-school program, I remember thinking to myself, there was a lot of kids that had behavior problems. So the kids would get in trouble. Parents would say, I don't care, do whatever you want. They get tired, then they get in trouble, they get kicked out there. So we see that cycle of trauma, right? But no one addressed the fact that parents are frustrated because they don't know what to do. So then here comes someone saying, I have a child who has dyslexia. And so how do I deal with that? A lot of parents don't know what to do with that. But if you have places where people are willing to talk about how to help them navigate those systems and understand what their children might be going through, I think it's helpful. But we have to start at the grassroots level. How do we help them with those things? Because I've seen a lot of kids get given up on because parents didn't know what to do. So that might be something, helping parents understand how to access resources without them feeling like it's all their fault. I hope that makes sense. But for me, it's just that basic sometimes.
And if I can just quickly add on to that, a great deal of the population we're talking about look the same, and they come from the same sort of background. Isms are real, racism is real in its intersectionalities, poverty is real, and how both things come about. It comes from a real place as well. A wise person once said, never confuse your schooling with your education. I really believe in the power of education and the consciousness raising that can happen through an education. I think the more and more we get people knowledge, understanding of isms and their impact, the more and more we can change things on a societal level, which would then impact things more specifically, such as issues of reentry or issues of anything that we want to bring up.
Thank you.
I really want to jump on this bandwagon. You know, both of the last two questions were framed as this or that. And the answer, you know, I think from all of us is both. You know, I mean, better understanding and funding for mental health services is what we're talking about when we talk about defund the police. You know, if you look at who's locked up, they come from the communities that are the most under-resourced as it relates to health, employment, education, parks and recreation, after-school programs, and yet we have an unlimited willingness to put money into policing and locking people up at great cost, but not investing in the same kind of services that my family or my neighbors' families would just take as a given, as a necessity. So it's not either or. We have to find a way of redirecting our resources to building the kinds of supports in communities that allow people to have, you know, full lives, that develop the full human potential of children, allow parents to be, you know, earners and caregivers and good shepherds of their children. At the same time, we deal with, you know, like spikes in violence, or, you know, what we're dealing with right now, which frankly is being positioned in a way that could eliminate progress that's been made over the last 15 or 20 years. I mean, for it to be framed as a problem with bail reform when there is no data that supports that the spike in violence has anything to do with bail reform, which we hadn't even really gotten to trying. And anybody who's interested in the facts on that, there's a conference at John Jay on the 13th of May that you're invited to. I mean, we have to not keep going for these false dichotomies, you know, or such a willingness to invest in social control and protecting good people from whatever. And I think that that's back to what you were hearing from me and my colleagues earlier. If people took the time to really hear people's stories, to walk in their shoes, you'd find that they're not so different in terms of what motivates them, you know, what underlies their decisions. They're just much more desperate as it relates to trying to piece together a life that works, you know, where there's childcare for their kids and a job that pays a living wage and a place to live, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question briefly. Just to go off of what you were talking about with putting money, you know, from after school programs into policing instead, we wanted to ask, how have changes in policing, specifically with the new governmental situation, impacted the view of formerly incarcerated individuals? Has tough on crime rhetoric or increased policing made work on addressing reentry needs more difficult?
Well, for me, I just see it as this is just the beginning. We don't know. The mayor's saying he's tough on crime, but we're still working out all those details from where I sit. But we don't know what the impact is yet. We're at the beginning stages of what Adams is talking about right now.
And to add on to that, when it comes to PD, when it comes to the prosecutor's office throughout the city, There's a lot that's going on when it comes to reentry and prevention on a more resource level that each sort of agency is doing that you may or may not know about, whether it be youth focused or not. Law enforcement is really moving in the right direction in terms of thinking of ways to not just lock people up, but how can we prevent individuals from getting involved with the criminal life in general. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel we have 2 more minutes if anybody, wants to add.
I just, if I could, I just wanted to follow up really quickly and support something that that Ann Jacobs mentioned. When they speak about scaling back bail reform, and because of the spike in violence in the city, the spike in violence is nationwide. It's not just specific to New York City. There's a spike in violence throughout the entire country. So there's a lot of moving pieces to, there's a lot of advocacy work that went into bail reform, that went into raise the age, that went into ban the box. Many folks, many partnerships went into that, and to just begin to undo some of that work is scary.
And please, as the youth who are the leaders of tomorrow, if y'all have ideas, reach out to law enforcement and make your voices known. We're always welcome of new ideas, new approaches. So just, if you can't get in, no matter what DA's office, no matter what borough of NYPD, if you cannot find anybody to talk to, come through me. I will definitely connect you with the right person. Law enforcement is willing to hear from you. So please, any ideas you have, come to us.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming to our panel today. We really appreciate it. We'd like to thank all of our panelists for spending their time with us and sharing their experiences and knowledge. I feel like it was a great night, and I hope you guys had, a good time, learned something. I know we did, and we appreciate you guys being here.